All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome everybody. Good morning. Thank you all for coming out today. My name is Emmett Zam. I'm going to be the announcer throughout the evening here today at Track 3. Up next, we have John Sellens, Nagios, and another layer of indirection. So give him a big round of applause, John Sellens.
I suspect Emmett was looking for his notes and saying, well, where the hell does John work? What is going on? I can't find the page. So what should I tell you about me? I won't tell you too much about me. I'm a longtime system administrator. I'm a Unix guy, which will be reflected in what I talk about today and how I address things. I have my own little company where I do little bits and pieces, and I also am a system administrator at FreshBooks in Toronto. Online cloud accounting for service-based businesses. There's the advertising right there. This is my favorite concept, and if some of you were in my talk yesterday, and I said this several times yesterday, but all problems in computer science can be solved by another layer of indirection. And if you're actually doing computer science or writing programs, then you might think of a data structure and you make a linked list, and then you take another pointer to that same linked list or some nonsense like that, or put a wrapper around your object-oriented stuff. And I went to school a long time ago, and we didn't have object-oriented in those days, so I don't know what that really means, but you can interpret that however you want. And one thing I like about this idea is that you can apply it in many, many different ways. And for example, I have kids, and I want to get the kids to do something. And I ask one kid, will you do this for me? And they say, no, screw off. So I ask the other kid, will you ask that other kid to do things for me? And then they don't yell at me. They'll yell at the second kid. So it doesn't usually work, but at least it gets them off my back. Unix philosophy, and I found, in theory, the origin of this idea of the Unix philosophy. And if you have the notes, you probably don't have the notes yet. But there will be notes. And you know what? I'm going to dive into my bag. And if anybody wants to follow along at home, you can by copying the notes off my little USB key. And this is like the, you go to a gas station, you get the key for the bathroom, and this is so you won't take it home with you. So if you don't have even a computer here, and you don't have well, Sherry probably got the notes yesterday anyway. We have piles of those. We have piles of those.
Anyone, if you have a computer and want the notes, raise your hand. I'm going to whip this right back at you then. Hold on a second. I throw like a girl, so my aim's much better than yours.
I was about to say, there's lots of girls that throw a lot better than I do, but you already said that, so there you go. So Unix philosophy. We talk about Unix philosophy as one thing that does one thing well. And if you look at, what's a good example? I was going to use cat as an example. All it does is it takes its input and spits it on the output. But if you look at the arguments to GNU cat these days, it'll wash your car, it'll do your laundry, it'll do 12 other things. So it's kind of expanded a little bit from its original idea. But there's still lots of examples in Unix and various other places where write a tool that does the right thing. And hopefully I can convince you that that's a good thing today. Now I'm in America, I'm Canadian, and I'm in the United States now, so I tried to make a joke, and I don't think that joke will work. But if you look at Nagios and how it's put together, and I mentioned this yesterday as well, there's a Nagios core team, there's a Nagios plugins team, there's a whole bunch of different people and groups, organizations everywhere doing little bits and pieces of Nagios, and they all tie together. And that's possible because when Nagios was originally written, and here's the diagram I stole yesterday as well, it's separated out into its component parts with well-defined interfaces between the different parts. So there's Nagios core up here, the web interface, the little green box down in the corner, that's external applications where it can throw commands into the command pipe or look at status logs. And the check commands, those are the plugins. Again, a separate piece from the Nagios core itself. So there's all these different discrete components that are working together with well-defined interfaces between them. And the big advantage of this is that it allows us to subvert Nagios and have it do things that maybe wasn't originally intended. We can add things on, we can put things in the middle, in between one place and another. And so it gives us a lot of flexibility in how we solve our own particular problems. And that's, and I'm going to hopefully build on that today with some of the tools I'm going to talk about. Well-defined interfaces. As I mentioned, all the Nagios components, the interface between Nagios core and the plugins, it's well-defined. Nagios runs a plugin, gives it some arguments on the command line, gives it some information in the environment, and the plugin sends back an exit code, exit status of 0, 1, 2, 3 for OK, warning, critical, unknown, and a line or multiple lines of text that Nagios just passes on to other people that might be interested in those lines of text. But Nagios itself just looks at the exit code and then does things based on that exit code. So if the exit code is not OK, Nagios might try again and again, and then eventually decide that this is broken and send out notifications. But it'll invoke the notification program and carry on from there. So all these interfaces between the CGIs and the Nagios core, the external command pipe where other programs can cause Nagios core to do different things, acknowledge downtime, acknowledge a problem, schedule downtime, various other things. They're all well-defined interfaces and they're all well-documented. And that makes our job a little easier. So where is their indirection? And hopefully I've mentioned a couple places already, and I'm going to give you a few more examples of where I think indirection shows up. My favorite plugin is the negate plugin. And what negate does, probably most of us know, but I'll repeat it for the folks following along at home. What negate does is it inverts the result of a plugin check. So for example, if you want to make sure that there's no web server running on a particular machine, you'll run check TCP port 80 or check HTTP, but probably just the check for the port is good, and then put negate in front of that. So check if port 80 is open, and if it is open, that plugin returns 0, which is OK. Negate will invert that, convert that 0 into a critical 2, and then Nagios will say, notice that something's wrong. So negate is a wrapper around other plugins. It's another layer of indirection. And as I said, that's handy for making sure that certain services are not running or files don't exist. So there's a whole bunch of plugins that check for a particular state of one kind or another. And sometimes you want to make sure that that state does not exist. Negate is your friend in that case. When I was talking yesterday, I mentioned that I talk about plugins in terms of local plugins and remote plugins. So a local plugin is something that looks at the state on your local machine. Check disk, for example, runs df and then interprets the output of df. Check HTTP typically will connect across the network to an HTTP port 80 on a remote machine, ask that port some questions, and report back to you about the state of that remote machine. Sometimes we want to run a local plugin like check disk on a remote machine. And the way we do that is by another layer of indirection using plugins like check by SSH, check NRPE, or check SNMP. And these plugins allow us to get there from here simply by directly or indirectly wrapping these plugins around an existing plugin. So we've added another layer between a local plugin. We've added another layer on top of that, and that gets us the results that we want. These days, there's a whole pile of different ways that you can get graphs out of Nagios or collect performance data and cause it to do something. As far as I can remember, the first thing that did graphing in Nagios was a little tool called APAN. And I can't even remember what it stands for, what APAN actually means. But what APAN was, it was a wrapper that you could put around other plugins. So you invoke a check like check ping, for example, because I'm pretty sure that was one of the ones that it handled. So instead of just invoking check ping directly, you would put the check APAN in front of check ping. So run check APAN, it runs check ping, gets the results from that plugin, does something with those results, and then passes them back to Nagios core. And what APAN did was it would look at the performance data that came back from that plugin call and generate RRD files with that data, and then provide a mechanism that you could